Are you ready to ditch the hustle for genuine impact? I've learned the hard way that riches just isn't in bank accounts. Join me as I share my journey of giving, growing, and finding true fulfillment while running a business and showing you how to design from a different why. This is Generosity Revolution. Born into slavery in Maryland, Harriet Tubman escaped to freedom in the North to become an American abolitionist and political activist. Despite the incredible risk to her life, Tubman led hundreds of family members and other slaves to freedom using a network of anti-slavery activists and safe houses known as the Underground Railroad. Tubman's knowledge of towns and transportation routes throughout the South made her an invaluable source for information to the Union military commanders during the Civil War. She became the first woman to lead an armed expedition in the war by guiding the Columbia River Raid, which liberated more than 700 slaves in South Carolina. After the war, Tubman continued to work helping impoverished former slaves and the elderly. She also joined Elizabeth Cady Stanton and Susan B. Anthony in their quest for women's suffrage. Hi, my name is Katie Stowe. I am your host for this podcast, Ordinary Person number 6,000,000.62. And this is such a powerful way to start this podcast. I wanted to start this podcast with a powerful story of someone who we would have never, ever known about if they hadn't been the kind of person that didn't just save themselves, but actually went back and did some incredibly courageous, brave, and generous deeds with her skills, with her mind, with her knowledge, with her experience. And so this whole episode is really going to be about the times in our lives where we feel really ordinary, like we don't have anything to really genuinely give, but we've got that fire and that spirit and that commitment and that drive to create something, to be in generosity, to give something to people, right? We have that drive to be entrepreneurial in our personality and our design. And so this episode is really going to be an encouragement for those of us that sometimes feel pretty ordinary, or we're not quite sure how we fit into the picture of our life and what we're meant to give. And I can't tell you how many times for me, as a very ordinary person, as someone who has always struggled with a lot of limitations, physical, emotional, and looking at everything that I've gotten to create, just as like a 25-year-old on planet Earth, getting to see how God has used me in so many ways to show up and give in the most unexpected ways. And so for you, I want to ask you, what can we learn together from Harriet Tubman's willingness to be used? Not even just her mind or her intelligence or her experience, but more so what I want to highlight is her willingness to go back and save more, her willingness to go back and free more slaves, her willingness to be used in ways where she would have been endangered and risked a lot, including her life. But what can we learn from her willingness, her courage, her commitment? How can we use that ourselves in our daily life as ordinary people that have the opportunity to do extraordinary things? The reason I started this podcast is because I am so sick of the times in my life where I spend so much time either self-loathing or self-obsessed. The times in my life where I forget that I have the privilege to be alive and to give and to show up and contribute in ways that are so incredibly inspiring, and to watch people's lives change just because I choose to show up and use the God-given skills and gifts that I have been given. And you have that same opportunity, my friend. Wherever you are, whatever you're creating, you have that opportunity to be able to show up and give something that may feel small and insignificant to you, but is extraordinary to someone else. A great example of this in my own life was I was about, I must have been around 9 or 10 years old. And my piano teacher was a professor at a university here in town. And she asked me to come speak at her music art appreciation type class. And I'm an artist. I am a musician. I had been taking lessons for, oh my goodness, like at least 6 years when she asked me. And I was so nervous, you guys. I was so nervous to go. It was one of my first times speaking in public. I'm a very outgoing people person, but I was really, really nervous. And I go in, I share about Norman Rockwell because I love his artwork, and a lot of my drawings at that point were very inspired by him. And had a beautiful conversation with all of these people. It was like a night class, and so it was a lot of parents, and they asked a lot of questions and thanked me for being there, and I laughed and went on my way. And y'all, I honestly didn't think much of it. I thought, well, I'm really grateful that they listened and they asked questions. That was really nice of them, but honestly, I was so nervous, and I don't know what I really did. And then a couple weeks later, my piano teacher sits me down. We were at a piano lesson, and she says, Katie, I don't know if you know how impactful speaking at my class was to the people there. I had a mom here who has a son with Down syndrome, and she's been so discouraged about the limitations that she sees her son having, and really buying into those limitations and feeling frustrated as the mom, right? And she saw you, someone who doesn't have hands, someone who has lots of limitations, lots of disabilities, be confident and have interests and be able to speak in front of people and be really engaging and interesting and fun and have a really normal-ish life. In other words, a good life. Have limitations and have a good life. And she was so encouraged. And y'all, that spoke to me, and it speaks to me even now, several years later, because it reminds me that those moments we feel inadequate or ordinary, or we feel like we don't really have anything to give, or what we did give wasn't really that valuable. And yet, we never really know what's going on the other side of our shares, of our contributions, of our generosity. And so being willing to show up and give, regardless of how you feel about what you gave, just giving for the sake of using your gifts and using your skills and trusting that however they're being used, however they're being given, it will impact someone. Someone will have this moment of appreciation for themselves, for their lives, for the value that they have to bring, that you're creating this spark for someone else in their life in a way that is so incredibly ripple effect, baby. It gets me fired up, but it's also incredibly humbling. And I want you to think back to a moment in your life where you got to give something that you thought was pretty ordinary. And maybe it was a gift that you gave to your parents, your mom, your dad. Maybe it was someone, a relative, a friend, a colleague, a peer. But you gave something to someone and you thought it was pretty ordinary. You thought it was pretty normal. But they were so blessed and touched and felt so seen and heard by you giving that thing. I want you to think about how that felt and what you contributed, what they felt when you gave, when you showed up. I think sometimes the reason that we become very self-loathing or self-obsessed or self-protected, right? We are isolating ourselves a lot in the current world. We're really focusing on our digital relationships. But it's almost a way that we keep ourselves safe. It's a way that we keep ourselves protected. There's those boundaries and those limits around us that keep us in a space where we may not get hurt or we may not feel some kind of discomfort. And what this ends up creating is a lot of loneliness and a lot of dissatisfaction, a lot of feeling irrelevant. It almost exacerbates the feeling of, I don't have anything to give. And then we feel like we need to have something to give all the time, right? It's like this snowball effect where when we're disconnected from our relationships, when we're disconnected from the people in our lives that we love and that love us, we miss out on actually being able to give in a way that could literally ripple into the future, that could be marked in a history book forever. I don't think Harriet Beecher Stowe would think that so many people in the world would still be reading Uncle Tom's Cabin. I don't think Harriet Tubman was thinking about the press that she would get or the books that would be written about her or the movies that would be created about her. I don't think she was thinking about any of that, because truly, like, in her heart of hearts, there was this rebel that saw what was wrong in the world, that saw what needed to be made right, and chose to be the person that moved the stone of progress, of freedom, of justice forward, even 700 lives forward. More than that, right? But like, we gotta be thinking, not, this is what's so fascinating to me around like social media and the world, that you'd think we'd be more connected now with the internet than we were before, and yet there's a level of disconnection and numbed out and noise that we are experiencing day to day that really blocks us from having intimate, connected, present relationships with people, so that we know we're actually connected enough to this person to actually know what would really bless them, what we could give to them that would bless them, right? But for these people, they weren't thinking about what they were going to get or the praise or the acknowledgement. They were in the moment. They were like, how are we going to get these people out? Think about, there's so many stories, and I'm going to bring you a story for each of these episodes. We're going to start each of these episodes off with a story of someone in the world being generous, being some ordinary person that became extraordinary because of their act of generosity. And what I really want to emphasize in all of this is two things. One, we wouldn't have ever known about them. But they did something incredible in the world because of that desire to be generous, to change the world, to shift into progress and whatever that looked like. And because of that, we know them. But the knowing them is the gift that we have looking back. It isn't necessarily the gift that they got to even experience. A lot of people are famous when they're dead. And if you're chasing for fame and acknowledgement and being seen and heard and validated from external sources, you're going to be chasing that until you're dead, and then it's going to be for nothing. And yes, there is absolutely something to be said about legacy, being able to leave behind something that's really impactful and inspiring. But if you need to be seen and validated and famous and known from this place of this is what will make me happy, then you will be chasing that for the rest of your life. And so as I really sat with starting this podcast, not only did I want to inspire people all over the world, including myself, on what can actually be created and moved forward when it comes to people really showing up and being generous. This has been a real theme in my own life. I've run a business for 4 years, and in those 4 years, I've been hot and cold about my business. I've been in and out and up and down, and a lot of my in and out was because my why behind being in business was about, I need to be rich, I need to be known, I need to be famous, to feel satisfied, to feel good enough, to feel like I made it, to feel like I arrived. And the reality is, none of that actually has you arrive. None of that gets you anywhere. And business, just like family, relationships, our life, in every moment we have the opportunity to show up and give a good gift, to be in contribution, to be in generosity, to show up and give something, even if it feels ordinary to us, but give something that might be extraordinary for the person across from us. And wow, what an incredible privilege in our businesses, in our brands, in our entrepreneurial collaborative endeavors, in the way that we interact with our communities, in the way that we show up with our families, in the ways that we show up with ourselves, in the way that we show up in our religious communities. I'm thinking about all these different qualifiers, different categories, places that we might be in. We have this opportunity to give, and give just because. To give because why wouldn't we? There have been so many times in my life that I've looked back and seen people who have given from a place of, I need to be seen in my pain. I need to be seen in my sacrificing. But the sacrificing wasn't really genuine, but it was from this place of, I need to be good enough, and therefore I'm either going to isolate myself and feel superior, right? Self-absorbed, Or I'm going to literally beat myself up. I'm going to not take care of myself. I'm going to, really push myself down, be self-loathing, right? It's all about self. And when we actually become a community of people that are creating a revolution of generosity, where we are showing up and creating and giving and changing the lives of the person across from us, the neighbors across the street, the community members that we haven't talked to yet, the people on our streets, the people who have homes, the people who don't, the baristas that work in our coffee shops, being kind, being thoughtful, saying something really generous, giving our money, our time, our skills, our gifts. Wow, this could actually change the world. So this leaves us with a question. Where in your life could something ordinary from you, a simple gift, a simple kind word, a simple thoughtful gesture, where in your life could a simple gift be an extraordinary give to the person across from you? Really think about this. Like, what could change because you decided to show up? Because you decided to give that gift that you've been hiding, holding back, keeping for yourself. What could happen when you're willing to be the one that stands up and creates a generosity revolution? That is truly why I created this podcast. My act, my one simple act, one simple gift that I have is to speak, is to use my voice to inspire and encourage others. And wow, what a privilege that we have gifts that we have the privilege of giving to others. And so the one simple act that I could do right now is to create this podcast and to blow it up and to have you be inspired to go take an action, to go be in generosity and contribution, to say something kind, to be thoughtful, to give, to contribute, to give your time, your money, whatever it is, to show up and be the Harriet Tubmans of the world, one person at a time. This is, my friend, the generosity revolution.